The explosion came just before Biden's trip to Israel. Here to discuss is Gerard Filitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. This pro bono legal service aims to protect the civil and human rights of the Jewish people. Gerard Filitti, thank you for joining us again. The White House National Security Council person said this afternoon that Israel is not responsible for the hospital explosion in Gaza on Tuesday, just yesterday. Hamas, of course, has blamed Israel from the outset. What evidence do we have to determine who's responsible here?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. We have a number of points of evidence, one of which is our own surveillance satellites, which were able to look at the blast and see what happened. We also have intelligence from the Israeli government. We have flight paths of the rockets. We know exactly when they were fired at 6:50 p.m. local time, exactly when the hospital was hit. We know that Israel was not operating in the airspace at that time, conducting any sort of raid. And we know by process of elimination that the only thing it could have been was a Hamas missile, or in this case, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad missile. They're in this as well. And now the other part of it is looking at images of the explosion itself. We don't have the cratering that we would normally have if this were an Israeli bomb. Rather, we're looking at what easily was a misfired Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket.
Now, Gerard, Hamas is using the explosion to spread anti-Israel propaganda. Talk to us about the media perception and the narrative fallout from this event, this explosion.
Unfortunately, this is not the first time that we've seen Hamas trying to exploit suffering of civilians that it causes itself in order to go after Israel. This is part of a long-standing propaganda war against Israel to portray them as an aggressor and Hamas as a victim when they are in fact a terrorist oppressor. So they are leveraging their contacts in media in the West, and fortunately getting even through to institutions like the New York Times and CNN to push the narrative that somehow Israel was responsible and to develop outrage against Israel and by extension against Jews everywhere. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the practical effects of Jews being targeted on the streets of Europe, the US, and the Middle East.
Now, as we're talking about, there's really two wars. There are two wars going on here, the kinetic war and the information war. How serious is fighting the information aspect of this war?
Well, the information aspect of this war is crucial. This is the first time that we've seen what Hamas actually does. We saw images put out by Hamas itself last week of the atrocities that they were committing. This is something that's new to most people. They didn't know, or they were not aware that this is what terrorists do, although we've seen ISIS and al-Qaeda and other groups do this. So getting that information public to get people to condemn Hamas and to get unity in fighting them is crucial. And even now, however, Hamas is fighting back. They're trying to put out propaganda. They're trying to discredit Israel. And this time, I think that they're doing so with limited success. But unfortunately, we're not only looking at Hamas, we're looking at state actors that back Hamas. We saw reports last week that the Chinese government is helping with propaganda efforts on behalf of Hamas. We see Iran involved as well. So this is a multi-front war indeed, and multiple actors involved.
Now, Gerard, let's look at President Biden's recent visit to the Middle East. He was scheduled to meet with Arab leaders in Jordan, but the meeting was canceled after Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas withdrew in protest of the hospital explosion we were talking about before. What's the significance of this cancellation?
In all honesty, it's not that significant. Mahmoud Abbas is in a difficult position. He is seeing that his popularity as a legitimate leader of Palestinians is waning because Hamas is increasing in popularity, ironically enough, because of their perverse actions in Israel. So he is posturing for the sake of maintaining his position as a spokesperson of the Palestinian people. But the real diplomacy was being done last week by Secretary of State Blinken. He was going from capital to capital, trying to dissuade involvement by other countries in this what we're looking at as a war between Israel and Gaza. The fact that Joe Biden didn't have the opportunity to visit with King Abdullah or with other leaders to discuss the situation is more a PR stunt, if you will, for these leaders to show their people that they care about Palestinians. But ultimately, it's not as meaningful as what happens behind closed doors at the ministerial level.
All right, Gerard Filitti, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.